DEI can. There we go. Okay, go ahead, Kristen. Sorry about that.
I just wanted to point out I had the same issue that Travis has about starting with clarifying what problem that we're trying to solve. I think that's really important to be able to answer these questions.
So the problem we're trying to solve, that's on that first slide. I'll go back to that. So we're trying to save some time on the front end by collecting pieces of information that, you know, typically are collected with each application for funding. And our goal is to collect those ahead of time to save some time on the back end if multiple applications come in from the same development team, so that those pieces of information are not collected so that efforts aren't duplicated, so that they're not all done in one fell swoop. I'm sure you've been in the situation where a piece of documentation is forgotten about or not included, and then I think we give a certain amount of time, a grace period, to get those documents turned in. But if we can figure out what can be done on the front end that would apply to a project, regardless of what the project is, that would apply more to the entities sponsoring and working on the project, then our thought is that would streamline things through the rest of the process. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Shelley, go ahead.
So my question is, would this mean then that you would remove developer capacity from the pointing and scoring from ANOFA? Because sometimes it appears that that's a subjective category, and if you lose a point, as we all know, if you lose 1 point, you don't get funded. And so if we're going to have to do this ahead of time, I certainly would hope that that means you're saying that our team has the experience to move forward, and that should not be a pointed and scoring piece of ANOFA.
Shelley, I'm not totally sure. I think the qualification process would be sort of a pass-fail kind of thing. I don't know if that would necessarily remove the scored part of an application in terms of experience. But that's good feedback, that if it does include a piece about scoring feedback, that you would want that to apply to the project.
I guess I'm just thinking I would think we want to minimize work and processes that could, I mean, are you saying that somebody would have to be pre-qualified to even apply? And if there's a mistake or somebody didn't meet the deadline, if you put deadlines, or if you're going to do it annually, or, you know, because if you're going to go to an annual process for a consolidated funding NOFA, then would you expect everybody to have their pre-qualification by December 31st of the previous year before you do the NOFA? I guess that's a little bit confusing, is that we're putting in sort of an extra step to do a NOFA. So that's all I'm kind of getting at, is you're still looking at possibly pointing experience, but is the pre-qualification to be able to see if people have experience? That's what I think is a little confusing. And Kristen, maybe you can help if I'm kind of going the same route that you are going.
And I'll just jump in here and say, Shelley, I think that's the type of feedback we're hoping to gather from this conversation. So thank you very much. I think that's those are the types of things we want to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, Jillian.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean back on Travis's comment that what problem we're trying to solve. And it sounds like the problem that's trying to be solved is to move projects through the pipeline more efficiently. But to me, this just seems like another hurdle each project has to overcome in order, right? We have to pre-qualify in order to submit a pre-application, which we all know won't get final funding until some sort of readiness thing is met. So it's really kind of and I'm not quite sure what purpose this serves. Like, has it been an issue that projects have been funded and then OHCS has discovered the developer isn't qualified to do the work? Because I mean, if that's a problem that's occurred, then this makes sense, but I just haven't seen that. It just doesn't seem like an issue. Also, when we're looking at the pre-qualification, you're looking by team. It's not actually applicable application to application if you have a different team. If you have a different architect and a different contractor for one project, then you actually have to pre-qualify twice. So it's, and then I'm with, sorry, I forget who was speaking before me, but this is also a point generating portion of the NOFA. So if we're pre-qualifying, then why would we also score it? Right? We've already been through that hoop. Why are we jumping through that hoop a second time? So I see how that could provide some clarity to developers, that those, you have those points, or nobody has those points, then everybody has those points. But it really is seeming like it's unclear how this solves the problem.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go to some folks who haven't spoken yet, and then Kristen, I'll come back to you. Let's see. Let's see. Z from Washington County. Hi. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Zachary. Julie and a couple others are familiar with me, although I'm relatively new to this process. But just to clarify, my understanding of this, my understanding from the presentations and what I've read and understood from the previous meetings was that this wouldn't be, isn't intended to put out new hurdles or extra requirements, but rather more to, and again, I'm coming to this from the side of someone who's doing the evaluations from the county side, but to provide like a roster and a set of groups that can also submit information so that we can check and just access all that information in one place. So it's creating more of a reference database for us to be able to access to speed up the process, and not something that's going to be supplanting the other qualification process or the point scoring. Is that an accurate description?
I think that we're open to a process that saves time, that takes care of pieces of the application or documentation that would that a team would have to complete for every project. The goal really is to save time, save steps, and so any sort of feedback about how if we can sort of think of it as that that this system is not it's not baked, that we really do want to hear. Okay. Are there things that you can take care of that teams or individuals can do ahead of time before they apply? So we are all ears.
And so that way you could have, let's say, two different organizations, one that has participated and gets into the system, one that's applying for the first time. Both would be supplying the same information in the end, but if the organization that had already gotten on the list is okay moving forward with the information they'd supplied in the process, we could just pull from that instead of having to request, and then the other group would gather the information as requested, and that would just speed things up.
I think that'd be a great way to do it. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks.
Anything else? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Ryan.
Hey, thanks, Britt. I'm Ryan Hood with Related Northwest. I guess just kind of objectively speaking and looking at this first question in terms of kind of what should be evaluated if we're talking about pre-qualification, something that came to mind is that perhaps considerations ought to be made for track record. So project delivery history, things like, the time from award to closing. And previously did the project close on time, or was it pushed, and did it take additional resources because of that? So I guess more of kind of a track record item there.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. That's really helpful. Appreciate that. Okay, Brandon. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, Brandon.
Sorry about that. Lowered my hand and didn't unmute. Brandon Breezik with Central City Concern. And I actually want to maybe push back on that, or at least give some consideration for if track record is going to be included in it, that, there's some opportunity to like defend, maybe, projects that weren't delivered on time. I think a lot of external factors can come into play to slow down, a developer or general contractor issues that may arise on a specific project. It's like consistent, that's understandable, but I don't think this qualification should be like seeking to like actively penalize people. I think it should be, if anything, trying to streamline it so that, if we're going in for 9% of small projects and a lift project all in the same year or something like that, you're not having to submit this documentation 3 times. I think that's where I see the big benefit for this. And just really that streamlining impact. I've gotten, we've had a 9% application where we've closed in 1 year and then we've submitted for 2 GHAP NOFAs in the same year and have had to submit duplicates of the same documentation because a different OHCS production manager or analyst, just doesn't have it on file. So that's where I really see the benefit for this. So.
That's great. That's great feedback, Brandon. Thank you for that. And just as a reminder, if folks could put their feedback in the easy, we're all taking notes, but having it in the easy retro would be so great. So thank you. Thank you for that, Brandon. Let's go to Peter.
Mike, your comments were previously received. I wanted to make a comment regarding.
Oh, Peter, I'm sorry. I'm having a little trouble hearing you, but it might just be me. Is anyone else? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That might help. Yeah. Thank you, Peter.
Better? Oh. You able to hear me now?
It's a little bit better if you could just talk a little bit loudly. That I think that might help.
Just wanted to make sure that in terms of the criteria for qualifications, that you're considering culturally specific organizations and small organizations that are newer to the development field. Because it seems like, there are real equity goals with this whole process. And we get concerned about people getting screened out who really are entering into the process.
That's a great flag. Thanks, Peter. Oh, go ahead.
Was on question 3 about an annual update for, as opposed to some other time structure. I think that a rolling application process that's completely transparent, it being a posted document, that is accessible to all parties, that just gets regularly updated when somebody gets approved, they get added to the list, would be the most beneficial type of structure for that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Let's see. Kristen, did you have a feedback on the first question?
It actually tied into what Peter was just speaking about, that
Okay.
I felt like in the discussion on the pre-development loan and how that's being set up, it's very much focused on building capacity for culturally specific and small rural organizations. And then the way this is written now, or how I perceive it, is that it's really focused on people already proving that they have capacity, and the capacity to deliver, and those priorities might be a little bit conflicting. So basically what Peter was talking about, that I hope if you do institute this, that it is meaningful in some way and does actually streamline, and I'm just not sure how that happens right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, unless there is any more feedback, we'll move on to the second question. Who on the development team should be required to pre-qualify? I know some folks have already spoken to this question, but if there's any feedback on this question, we are happy to talk about it. Brandon, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was writing in the chat, but I definitely agree with Travis's point. I think procurement for architect GC happens oftentimes later in the process. And so requiring them to be pre-qualified, I understand with the readiness thresholds moving up, that might change as far as timing for, procurement. But I do think that, if our goal is expanding, MWESB, contractors, architecture, design consultants, I don't think that there should be the upfront requirement for them to be pre-qualified, especially if it takes into consideration like past participation on OHCS projects. I think maybe just having a requirement for the owner or developer to have, if there is that previous experience included in that. I think having the owner or developer be pre-qualified would be like what I would think would be the most beneficial, so that development consultants are able to work with smaller owners, or the owners that internally developing. I think that makes the most sense to me.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks, Brandon. And if you could make sure that gets into the easy retro, we really appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else on the second question? And on it, actually, we don't. The feedback doesn't have to be question specific. We can talk about anything. Yeah, Jillian, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and I did put this on the board, that having the property manager need to be pre-qualified, right? Like, we're talking about this pre-qualification as prior to the pre-application. So locking in your property manager, that a lot changes, right? Property managers, even their capacity to take on new business could change between the time you would submit something for pre-qualification and the time you would be ready to receive funding. So I think that is really asking for something a little bit too early in the process. I do think track record is important, but not just track record for things like MWESB participation, but track record in previous fundings. Did you do what you said you were going to do? Did you provide the number of 30% units you said you were going to provide? Did you provide services on site that you said you were going to provide? Did you follow through on the commitments you made at application in your final product? Because there are certainly some organizations out there that have not followed through and then get repeated funding. And I would like to, not just somebody had, 25% MWESB participation instead of 30. That's certainly something to look at, but somebody said they were going to provide PSH and didn't is also something that's worth asking a developer about.
That's great. Thank you for that. Really helpful. And thanks for putting it on the easy retro. Appreciate that. Well, I'll just go ahead. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Shelley.
Sorry, just Jillian's response kind of triggered. So I guess because MWESB is also a pointing category, and I believe I've been on the stakeholder work group working with Claudia on that, and I know they're looking at pointing and looking at track record. So again, are you duplicating if you look at track record here and then you look at track record in the NOFA under development capacity and WESB for pointing? So I guess it's just seems redundant, but are you trying to say you pre-qualification, if you don't meet this, don't apply? How do you get better? I mean, it's still a little confusing to have this pre-qualification process, and yet still you're going to have to submit and write up all your information about your development team capacity in the NOFA, and your MWESB goals and history is going to be starting to be a pointing category, I believe.
Thank you, Shelley. Yeah, the thing I'm hearing pretty consistently from folks is don't this process, however it shakes out, should not be duplicative. Don't make folks do things more than once. If the goal really is to save time, so I hear you loud and clear. The NWSB specific feedback, thank you for that, and thank you for serving on that that stakeholder group. And we've got that feedback recorded, and again, if you could include that on the Easy Retro, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Oh, Angela, did you want to chime in?
Oh, I think David had his hand up first.
Oh, sure. I sorry, I thought you might have wanted to say something on that that last question.
I'm looking to circle back maybe 2 or 3 comments ago. So I figured.
Gotcha. Okay, that sounds great. David, go ahead.
Hi, this is Jerry Allen. I'm here together with David. We're in the same room, and our pronouns are he, him for each of us. And I was partially targeting a question to Roberto because we were talking with him in the last Zoom. We are going to be in Salem on Monday, and we'd like to have a chance to meet directly for a few minutes with some of the staff. We submitted by email a draft version of our pre-application yesterday, and we want to ask questions like, how can we improve it? What is still needed? All of those kind of questions. So is someone available to meet with us on Monday afternoon?
So David, this isn't the space for that kind of coordination, but we'll make sure that somebody reaches out to you and gets that all taken care of. So we'll answer you. We'll get back to you offline. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you betcha. Let's see, Angela, go ahead.
Yeah. What organization were you with, David? I'm sorry. I think I may not have caught that.
Oh, are you asking that of me?
Yes.
Yes, we're Housing Independent AF. We just got our 501c3 designation a couple days ago. So
okay. Yeah, we'll coordinate with you from the MF NOFA inbox. So I'll run through that thing. I wanted to circle back to the comments around the integration of past performance, and I heard not to make it duplicative, and it sounds like, at this point it's up in the air, but if folks could give more feedback on where they think that should live, right? Because right now we have an opportunity for really specific feedback. Is past performance a metric that folks would see best integrated at pre-qualification, at application as a threshold, or as a part of scoring? And if there's more specific feedback to that, I'd be grateful for it.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. Maybe if folks have a strong preference either way, we could include that on in the other column on the Easy Retro. You can sort of put your I don't want to say vote, but just if you want to include that specific feedback on that question that Angela just posed to the group in that other section, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was just kind of, hearing this, I agree with a lot of that of not, trying not to replicate things in, but there are parts of even any application that are going to be stagnant. So your development team capacity, things like that. So if there is a way to, I don't know, give your score that part earlier in the process, or to where you are kind of speeding up part of the part of that, I'm not sure what that looks like. And but I was just kind of thinking of some ideas, so you're not providing everything twice. But there are, once you have your team together, once you do have your architect, your contractor, and you figure out who's working on it, you kind of do have that part of it, and that's a big part of an application. A lot of times it is need to be scored. So I don't know how that would be integrated earlier, but just kind of throwing out ideas.
Yeah, that's great, Steve. Thank you. We love ideas. So that's awesome. Appreciate that. Well, we'll go ahead and go down to the third question, and then I'm going to put the Easy Retro up on the screen for everybody to see, so we can kind of take a look at what we've got so far from folks. Question 3 is, would a pre-qualification registry updated annually be the most efficient process? And what we mean by that is just, should we have a window at the beginning of the year where every sort of a development team member, you know, if there's an architect that knows or is likely to, because they have in the past, if that they're likely to be part of a development team that will apply for OHCS resources, should all those members do that pre-qualification process, you know, at the beginning of the year, that we would then confirm once an application came in? Should it be on a rolling basis so that the pre-qualification process happens right before an application is submitted? We're very open to the timing question of how to collect this information and keep it. Any thoughts on that? Okay, I will still leave some space to answer questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second and then move over to the Easy Retro. Please feel free to keep adding your comments to that Easy Retro. And I'm going to pull that up right now. Okay. Oh, great. We're getting some great feedback in there. That's awesome. Fantastic. Okay. Let's see, Glenn, are we getting anything in the chat or the Q&A that we should talk about?
I think the questions were already asked.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'll just be quiet for a little while at the risk of awkward silence and just let folks collect their thoughts and really leave some space for any last remaining pieces of feedback. Again, this isn't the last opportunity to give feedback on this issue, and it really is in a preliminary state. Nothing has been decided, so your feedback really is a critical part of this process.
And we have a few seconds remaining before we go back to the general session.
Oh, okay, great. Great timing. That was intentional. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate your time and your feedback. Thank you.